Hello, fourth grade, and welcome to Unit 3, Week 2. Let's go over your vocabulary. Your first word is the word mature. So when someone is mature, that means they are behaving kind of like an adult or just as someone who's older than they are. So you can say that my sister is very mature. She always does her work carefully and keeps her room nice and clean and organized. So anytime you're talking about someone who is able to think or act older than they are, we say that they are mature. Your second word is the word assigned. So when you are assigned something, you are given that thing, or it's a thing or like a task. So I can assign you your homework, right? I'm giving you a homework assignment. Or I can assign you a job, and I can say you're assigned to make sure that the library in our classroom is always organized. Your next word is the word resident. So a resident is just someone who lives in a particular area. So I'm a resident of San Diego. You can be a resident of a different country if you live in a different country. So a resident just means someone who lives in a particular place. Something that is done gingerly is done really carefully. So the word gingerly just means very, very cautious and very careful. So think about when you're carrying something that's very breakable, right? You carry it very gingerly. Or if someone has to carry a really tall cake across the room, right, to get it to the table, they're carrying it very gingerly. They're moving very carefully, very cautiously to make sure they don't knock it over. Your next word is the word selective. So selective is, if someone is selective, they are the ones that are choosing something, or they're very, very particular and careful about the things that they are choosing. So I can say I'm very selective with the kind of food that I like to eat, like a picky eater. Or I'm very selective about the kind of books I like to read, right? I have a particular kind that I like. I pick them out very carefully. So selective just means someone who chooses things, especially choosing them in a way that's really careful. Your next word is the word scattered. So when something is scattered, that means it's thrown around, it's spread out. So if you have, for example, a handful of glitter and you toss it up in the air, you've scattered it, right? You've tossed it around. If you have people that are kind of spread out in an area, those people are scattered around that area. Your next word is the word generosity. So generosity comes from the word generous. So someone who is generous likes to give or share with others, right? They're not greedy or stingy. That's the opposite. That's the antonym. So generosity is that willingness to share and to give to others. And your last word is the word organizations. Now, organizations are teams or groups of people that come together for a purpose. You can have organizations that make sure the beaches are clean. You have organizations to make sure that that recycling is happening, to make sure that we're not harming the environment. There are organizations to help people who, are poor individuals. There are organizations for everything. So an organization is a group of people who come together and they're working towards a specific goal or a specific purpose. Now, our spelling words for this week are going to focus on silent letters. And the most common silent letters we have are the letters K, G, W, H, B, and N. And these are letters that you find in words sometimes. We call them silent letters because we don't say them, we don't pronounce them. And we're going to go through your words and you'll see what I mean. So when I say the word wrinkle, I don't say wa wrinkle, I say wrinkle. So that W kind of gets taken away. It's silent. So we have wrinkle, wriggle, wrapper, wrench, answer, need. Now this need, K-N-E-A-D, is like what you see your parents or someone do with dough when they're making dough for bread or for pizza. They knead it. That means they're kind of pushing it and massaging it, not need like I need to go to the doctor. That's a different kind of need. Next we have knives, known, kneel, new, plumber, combs, thumbs, lambs, condemn, resign, doubtful, hour, honest, honor, person, curl, shirt, knuckles, and wrestle. So you'll see that the highlighted words over here on our list, the ones that I highlighted with blue, are words that we don't say out loud, right? They kind of get swallowed, they get eaten. Those ones are silent. Next, we're going to jump into our ELA and our grammar notes for this week, and we're going to be revisiting open and closed syllables. So we have gone over this before. I'm going to go over it just really briefly again. But the notes are all here if you want to reread them more carefully. So all of our words have syllables, at least one syllable, and every syllable has a vowel sound in it. Now we have long vowel sounds and we have short vowel sounds. When we have a syllable that has a long vowel sound, that's usually a clue that tells you that that is an open syllable because the last letter in that syllable is a vowel. If we have a short vowel sound, that's usually because the last letter in that syllable is a consonant, so not a vowel, and that makes a short vowel sound. And we'll go through a couple of these words as examples. Another thing we want to remember about syllables, it's right here in the middle. If a word has a double consonant, you divide the syllable in between that double consonant. So like the word mitten, M-I-T-T-E-N. I divide my word between those two letter T's. So M-I-T is my first syllable and T-E-N is going to be my second syllable. And both of those are closed syllables because it says I and eh. It doesn't say I or a or e. Those long vowel sounds, we find them in open syllables. So if we have the word kitty, K-I-T-T-Y, I have a double consonant, so I'm going to divide right in the middle. So the first syllable, K-I-T, kit, has a short I sound, it says I, and it ends with the letter T, which we know is a consonant. So t, kit, is a closed syllable, and T, how it has that long vowel sound, ends with a Y, so that's a vowel in this case. That's an open syllable. The word spider, spider. We hear the I, the long I sound in the first syllable. We see that it ends with an I, so we know that's an open syllable. And der, D-E-R, says in the middle. It doesn't say E. So since it has a short vowel sound and it ends with a consonant letter R, we know that that one is a closed syllable. So the word pony has two open syllables because they both end with vowel letters. The word candy has a closed syllable in the beginning because the C-A-N ends with the letter N, and we know that is a consonant. And then the D-Y ends with a Y, and that works as a vowel in this case. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is something that's a little bit new. It's tied to something you already know. It's just developing it a little bit further. So we're going to be talking about verbs and verb tenses and the progressive form of verbs. Now, a verb tense tells us when something is happening, past, present, future. We already know that. Now, verbs can be written in regular, simple past, present, future tense, or they can be written in the progressive form. Progressive means it's something that was going on for a while. It wasn't something that you did just really briefly and then you were done. Progressive means like ongoing. So if we're talking about past progressive, anytime we're making something a progressive, we're adding a word before it and we're adding ing to that verb. So a verb in the past tense shows that an action already happened. But if we want to make it progressive, we're going to use was or were. So remember our helping verbs over here. We have certain helping verbs that show us tense and some of them that didn't before, but we'll get to those later. We're going to focus on the ones that do show tense. We're going to add ing to the verb. So instead of saying we walked, I can say we were walking. So I added the were and I added the ing to my verb, and that shows me that it was something that was ongoing. It wasn't just we walked and we were done. We were walking for a while. I cleaned becomes I was cleaning. So to make it past progressive, remember we're going to add was or were, depending on the verb, and then we're going to add ing. Instead of saying they washed, I can say they were washing. Instead of she reached, she was reaching. So those are your clues for your past progressive. Use was or were and use ing. Now, if we're talking about present progressive, that means something that we're doing right now that we're still actively doing. It's not something we're doing and we're finishing right away. It's something that's ongoing. Now, for present progressive, we're going to use am, is, and are as our helping verbs, and we're going to add ing to our main verb to turn it into a progressive, so a present progressive verb. Instead of saying we walk, I'm going to say we are walking. That means it's something we're actively still doing right now that's going to continue. I run, I am running. He talks, he is talking. They draw, they are drawing. So depending on the subject in your sentence, it's going to tell you which one of these helping verbs you're supposed to use, am, is, or are. So for am, you pair that with I. Is when you're talking about another singular subject. He is, she is, or if you're adding, the name. Are is when you're talking about a plural. They, we, use are. And then you add ing onto the end of the main verb. So helping verbs for present progressive are right here, and plus the ing. And then you add that ing onto the main verb. Now we also have future progressive. So when we're talking about future progressive, we're saying will be, right? Because that shows it's something that we will do later. We haven't done it yet. So instead of saying they will go, I can say they will be going. She will draw, she will be drawing. So she's not drawing just the one thing. She will be drawing maybe for a while. Maybe she's drawing for a couple of hours. Maybe she's drawing during the entire art class. So progressive just means something that's ongoing. It's something that has already started and you can't see the end of it just yet. So you're kind of jumping into the middle of it. And the last bit that we need to talk about is subject-verb agreement. And this is something that you already do regularly when you're writing and when you're speaking, and you see it often when you're reading. But sometimes we don't know the names for these rules yet. So subject-verb agreement means the number of things in your subject, is it singular or plural, needs to agree with the form of the verb that you're using. So if we have a singular subject, right, one person or one thing as a subject, our verb needs to have an S or an ES on the end of it. When we have a plural subject, right, they, we, or people, or them, or whatever, anytime you're talking about a group, anything that's more than one, we do not put anything on the verb. We leave that verb alone exactly the way it is. So she walks, he draws, the baby watches. Those are all singular. Now plurals, we can say they talk, we draw, people sing. And you can see the verbs that are underlined don't have anything attached to the end of them. Now, just like with almost every rule in the English language, we have an exception. Our exception here is when you're talking or when you're using the subject I or you. If your subject is I or you, you're going to treat it the same way you treat a plural subject, and you do not add anything on the end of it. I write, you read. I don't say I writes or you reads. So plural subjects or I or you all stay exactly the same when we're writing the verb that goes with it. If it's a singular subject, we add an S or ES onto the end of it. And that will take you through to the end of your language arts notes here. Now, I did also attach a video in our notes section in Google Classroom about progressive forms of verbs. You don't need to watch the whole video, just watch until the 3-minute and 10-second mark. The rest of it is extra information, things that we'll get into later that you don't need to know right now. So I only want you to watch from the beginning of the video up until the 3-minute and 10-second mark there. Next, we're going to go into our books. So we're going to go over here to resources, and we will open both of our books. Now we are in Unit 3, Week 2. So we're going to read the story Aguinaldo. And this is a realistic fiction. So it's a story that's fictional, but it could happen because all of the elements in it are elements of stories that could happen in real life.
Genre: realistic fiction. Aguinaldo by Lulu Delacré. Illustrated by John Parra. Essential question: in what ways can you help your community? Read how a girl gives someone a special gift. When I was growing up in Puerto Rico, I went to a small girls' school. Every December, Señorita Antonia, our teacher, insisted that the 6th grade visit the nursing home in Santurce. Bringing Christmas cheer to the old and infirm was an experience she felt all 6th graders should have. But the year I was in 5th grade, Señorita Antonia decided our class was mature enough to join the older girls and have that experience too. "I'm not going," I whispered to my friend Margarita. "You have to, Maria," she said. "Everyone has to go." All of my classmates looked forward to the trip. Some because they liked the rackety bus ride to anywhere. Some because they could skip school for the day, and that meant no homework. And others because they believed that to do a 6th grade activity in 5th grade was very special. But ever since my only grandma died in a nursing home, the thought of going back to one made me feel sad. I didn't want to go. As I sat at my desk coloring the Christmas card that I was assigned to make for a resident, I tried to figure out how I could skip this field trip. Maybe they would let me help at the library. Maybe I could write a special book report at school while they were out. Or better yet, I could wake up ill and stay home from school. As soon as the recess bell rang, I ran over to the library to try out my first plan. "Hola, Maria," Señor Collazo greeted me. "Hola, Señora Collazo," I said, smiling sweetly. "I came to ask you if I could stay here tomorrow to help you paint posters for the book fair. I really don't mind spending the whole day at the library." "Aren't you going on a field trip tomorrow?" Señora Collazo asked. "My class is going, but I could be excused if you need my help." The librarian thanked me and said that if I wanted to help, I could join the other students who had already volunteered to stay after school to do the posters. Biting my lower lip, I left the library in a hurry. It was time to try my second plan. Outside, seated on the polished tiles of the covered corridor, my friends were having a tournament of jacks, but I didn't join them. Instead, I marched right to the 6th grade classroom. Señorita Antonia was grading papers at her desk as I went in. "Señorita Antonia?" I said softly. "Yes, Maria?" Señorita Antonia asked. I stared for a moment at the buckles of my shoes. Then, without looking up, I took a deep breath, swept back my black curls, and asked, "May I stay in school tomorrow to do an extra book report?" "I'm afraid not, Marilia," Señorita Antonia said firmly. "Tomorrow is our trip to the nursing home. Both the 5th and 6th grades are going. But if you want to do an extra book report, you can do it over the weekend." I glanced across the room to the trays of besitos de coco, coconut sweets, that the 6th graders had prepared to bring to the nursing home residents as an aguinaldo. Aguinaldos, surprise Christmas gifts, were fun to receive. But still I wasn't going, so it wasn't my concern. I whispered thank you to the teacher and left. That evening at dinner time, I put my third plan into action. To my parents' surprise, I had 2 big helpings of rice and kidney beans. 2 helpings of Mommy's tembleque for dessert, and 3 glasses of mango juice. I never ate so much. I figured that with all this food I was sure to get indigestion. I went to bed and waited. I tossed and turned. I waited for several hours, expecting a stomachache any second. But instead, the heavy meal made me tired, and I fell sound asleep. Stop and check. Marilia does not want to go on the trip to the nursing home. Which words on page 202 help you visualize Marilia's desperation? Marilia, get dressed, Mommy called early the next morning. We have to leave soon for school. How unlucky. I woke up feeling quite well. There was only one thing left to do. I ran to the bathroom, let the hot water run, and drank a full glass of it. Then I went back to bed. Marilia, Mommy came in. Get up. What is going on with you? I feel warm, Mommy, I mumbled. Mommy looked at me with concern. She touched my forehead and my neck. Then she left the room, and in a few minutes came back with a thermometer in her hands. I opened my mouth, and she slipped it under my tongue. When the time was up, Mommy pulled the thermometer out and read it. 106 degrees, she exclaimed. That's impossible. You look perfectly fine to me. After a little questioning, I confessed what I had done. I told Mommy how much I didn't want to go on the field trip. You know, Marilia, she advised, you might enjoy yourself after all. Besides, I've already promised Señorita Antonia 2 trays of tembleque to bring as an aguinaldo to the residents of the home. There was no way out. I had to go. In the big lobby of the nursing home, paper streamers hung from the tall windows. The residents were scattered everywhere. Some were seated on the couches. Some were in wheelchairs. Some walked clutching onto their walkers. A nurse hovered over a group of men as she dispensed pills. Señorita Antonia took out her guitar, and at the sound of the first bar, we began to sing a medley of carols. Several of the girls accompanied with maracas, güero, and palitos. Meanwhile, the residents clapped and sang along, while a 6th grader passed around our cards for us to give to them later. As I watched how happy our music made the residents, memories of my grandma rushed to me, making me dizzy with sadness. Suddenly I saw that everybody was visiting with the residents. I was alone. I didn't feel like joining one of the groups. Maybe I could quietly slip away until the visit was over. I hoped it would be soon. Then I noticed a chair against the yellow wall. I sat there, still holding the card I had made. Across the room there was a frail old lady in a wheelchair. She was alone too. I looked at my card again. It was rather pretty. I had painted it with shades of blue and gold. Maybe I could just hand it to her and leave. It might brighten her day. So gingerly I crossed the lobby and stood next to her.
"Who is there?" the old lady asked as she coquettishly fixed her silver bun with a light touch of her manicured hand. "My name is Marilia," I said. "I brought you a card." "Dios te bendiga," the old woman said. "God bless you." She reached for the card, but her hand was nowhere near it. Her gaze was lost in the distance, and I knelt down to place the card in her hand. It was then that I saw the big clouds in her eyes. She was blind. What was the use of a card if you couldn't see it? I felt cheated. I stood up to go back to my chair. "My name is Elenita," she said as I tried to slip away. Tell me, Marilia, what does your card look like? I knelt down beside her, and in as vivid detail as I could, described the three wise men I had drawn. Then Elenita's curious fingers caressed every inch of the card. She couldn't have enjoyed it more if she had seen it. When the coconut sweets were passed around, she mischievously asked for 2. "I bet you are not supposed to eat one of these," she giggled. "No," I replied. "Señorita Antonia told us that the sweets were just for residents." "Well," she whispered, "nobody said I couldn't give you one of mine." I liked Elenita. I placed the besito de coco in my mouth and relished it even more, especially since I wasn't supposed to have it. I enjoyed being her partner in mischief. After that, she asked me if I liked music and if I knew how to dance. I said. I love to listen to music and dance. Then she told me how, when she was young, she had been a great dancer. I used to dance so well that men would line up for a chance to dance with me. I had many, many suitors at one time, she said. I had suitors that serenaded me in the evening, and others that brought me flowers. But I didn't go out with all of them. You have to be selective, you know. Too soon we were interrupted by Señorita Antonia. It was time to get on the bus and return to school. I didn't want to leave. "Thank you for the card, Marilia," Elenita said. She opened her hand and gestured for me to give her mine. "I'll keep this card to remember you by." "I'm sorry you can't see it," I said as I squeezed her hand. For a moment, it felt as warm and giving as my own grandma's. "I wish I had brought you a better aguinaldo." "The best aguinaldo," Elenita said, "was your visit, Marilia." As I left, I felt light and warm and peaceful. On the bus ride back, I told my friend, Margarita, all about our visit. I couldn't wait to come back next year when I was in the 6th grade. I already knew what I would bring Elenita. I would make her a collage. That way, she would be able to feel the many textures of my picture, even if she couldn't see it. And maybe I could make the picture of her dancing. I knew she had been very pretty when she was young. "Are you going to wait until next Christmas to give her your collage?" Margarita asked. I thought for a moment. "Maybe Mommy could bring me back sooner," I said. As I looked out the window, I remembered how good Elenita's hand felt to touch. It's funny how sometimes things change unexpectedly. Just that morning, I didn't want to go at all, but then I couldn't wait to visit my new friend again. We had gone to the nursing home to give aguinaldos, and what a very special aguinaldo I had been given. Elenita's friendship. Stop and check. Reread. Why is Marilia planning on making a collage for Elenita? Reread page 208 to check your understanding. Genre: expository text. Compare texts. Read about kids who are making a difference in their communities. Partaking in public service. There is no doubt about it. Volunteering is an important part of American life. About 27% of us volunteer in some way. This means that 1 American out of every 4 is performing a public service. Many volunteers are teens and children. In fact, in the last 20 years, the number of teen volunteers in this country has doubled. Youth service organizations, such as 4-H clubs, have grown in popularity. Kids join local volunteer groups to give back to their communities. They work together to help others and to improve their schools and neighborhoods. Community projects may include planting gardens or collecting food and clothing. Some kids raise money for local charities. The volunteer opportunities are limitless. Top 4 volunteer activities for kids. Fundraising. General labor. Collecting, handing out food. Teaching younger kids. Some amazing young people have truly taken volunteering to the next level. They show the rest of us what public service is all about. Alex Lynn supports the idea of recycling, but he's not concerned with the kind that involves bottles and cans. Instead, he urges others to recycle e-waste, which is electronic garbage. Electronics, such as computers and game systems, have chemicals that can hurt the earth. They must be recycled and stored safely. Alex was just 9 years old when he formed the WIN Community Service Team to recycle electronics. By the time he was 16, he had recycled 300,000 pounds of e-waste. He also helped to write a law against e-waste in his home state of Rhode Island. Alex soon realized that reusing was an even better solution to e-waste. Working with his school, he set up a program that fixed old computers and donated them to students in need. Eventually, this program grew. Now it sends computers to people around the world. Erica Fernandez also cares about the environment. She was 16 years old when she heard that a natural gas plant would be built near her hometown. Erica learned that the plant would pollute the air. It would bring harmful chemicals to nearby towns. Erica decided to do something about it. She organized groups to protest the plant. They spoke out publicly. They wrote letters to the government. Eventually, the state agreed to cancel the plans for the plant. Thanks to Erica, the local environment was saved. Katie Stagliano had a gallant idea that started with a tiny seedling. When Katie was 9 years old, she brought home a cabbage seed from school. From that seed, she grew a 40-pound cabbage in her garden. The cabbage was as big as Katie. She donated it to a soup kitchen, and it helped to feed almost 300 people. After that, Katie never looked back. She has donated thousands of pounds of produce to people in need. Evan Green was only 7 years old when he started the Red Dragon Conservation Team. Its purpose was to protect the tropical rainforest. It has since become an international group of kids who want to save the planet. The kids collect community donations and send them to the Center for Ecosystem Survival, CES, in California. CES uses the donations to buy land in the rainforest and in coral reef areas around the world. This protects the land and sea nearby from being destroyed by humans. Simple ideas solve problems. All of these kids started with a simple idea. They worked to help their community in important ways. Their generosity has affected people around the world. Kids have the power to make a positive change through volunteering. In the words of Evan Green, you don't have to be an adult to make a difference. Make connections. In what ways are these young people making a difference? Describe the role of public service. Use examples from the selections.
All right, that takes us to the end of our literature anthology book. We're going to jump in and take a look at our reading and writing workshop. So we have our vocabulary words here for you to review, but we're going to be looking at the story Remembering Hurricane Katrina.
Genre: realistic fiction. Remembering Hurricane Katrina. Leaning over my steering wheel, I watched the heavy clouds roll in. The sky became a darker shade of gray, and raindrops were soon scattered across my windshield. A storm was coming. Glancing at the boxes of clothes stacked in the back seat, I smiled to myself. A torrential downpour of rain began beating against my windshield as lightning flickered across the sky. I pulled the car off the road until my driving visibility improved. People on the sidewalk held purses and briefcases over their heads in a futile effort to keep from getting wet. Children screamed and danced around in the downpour. The rain reminded me of another storm 10 years earlier. Hurricane Katrina slammed into the Gulf Coast of the United States when I was 9 years old. The ferocious storm caused untold amounts of damage. One of my strongest memories from that time was watching the evening news with my aunt. A reporter stood inside the Houston Astrodome, surrounded by thousands of people. They all shared the same weary expression. Many wore torn and dirty clothes, and some had no shoes on their feet. They slowly shuffled along, their faces full of sadness. "Are they here because of the hurricane?" I asked softly. Aunt Lucia nodded. "See, Hector, these people are from New Orleans, Louisiana. Just a few days ago, Hurricane Katrina destroyed their homes and possessions, and they lost everything they owned. So now they are temporary residents of the Astrodome. It's a place for them to stay until it's safe to go home." I knew a lot about Katrina. The storm had formed in hot and humid tropical weather and then traveled north. It had come so close to Texas that I worried it would strike us in Houston. It missed us, but other cities were not so lucky. The TV news reporter looked around. People tried to speak to her, but she was being selective about whom she wanted to interview. I noticed a little boy sitting behind her on a cot hugging an old teddy bear. Watching him, I knew I had to do something. The next day, my friends joined me at our volunteer club, the Houston Helpers, and together we devised a plan. We wanted to collect toys and give them to the kids at the Astrodome, because donating the toys would help bring some happiness into the lives of these families. Anxious to get started, we made lists of what we needed to do. Then every one of us was assigned a specific task. We agreed to spread the word to our schools and other organizations. 3 days later, after a Herculean effort on our part, the donation bins were overflowing with new toys. I'll never forget the day when we entered the Astrodome with our gifts. Children flew toward us from all directions. Smiles lit up their faces as we pulled toys from our bags. Grateful parents thanked us for our generosity and complimented our group leaders on how thoughtful and mature we all were. Bzzz! My cell phone jolted me back to the present, and I noticed that the storm had passed. "Hector?" "See, yes, hi, Jeannie. Do you have the donations? A few more families have arrived, more victims of yesterday's tornado." "Yes, I have the clothing donations. The storm delayed me, but I'll be there soon." I gingerly eased my car into the suddenly busy traffic. It felt good to know that I was making a difference again. Make connections. Talk about how Hector and his friends make a difference in their community. What are some things that you have done to help your school or community?
Okay, so we're going to talk about our comprehension strategy and skill for this week. Our comprehension strategy, again, is to visualize, and that's when we are imagining what's going on in our story by using the words that the author has used to describe the setting, to describe the characters. Let's go ahead and read through this section.
Visualize. When you read fiction, picture the events, characters, and setting in your mind to help you better understand the story. As you read Remembering Hurricane Katrina, Visualize what happens in the story. Find text evidence. In the first two paragraphs of Remembering Hurricane Katrina on page 181, I can use the details to picture the setting. The narrator describes the rain, the lightning, and the people on the sidewalk holding briefcases and purses over their heads. Leaning over my steering wheel, I watched the heavy clouds roll in. The sky became a darker shade of gray, and raindrops were soon scattered across my windshield. A storm was coming. Glancing at the boxes of clothes stacked in the back seat, I smiled to myself. A torrential downpour of rain began beating against my windshield as lightning flickered across the sky. I pulled the car off the road until my driving visibility improved. People on the sidewalk held purses and briefcases over their heads in a futile effort to keep from getting wet. Children screamed and danced around in the downpour. The rain reminded me of another storm 10 years earlier. Hurricane Katrina slammed into the Gulf Coast of the United States when I was 9 years old. The ferocious storm caused untold amounts of damage. I can use these descriptive details to visualize what the setting looks and sounds like. Point of view. The narrator's point of view tells how the narrator thinks or feels about characters or events in the story. When the narrator uses the pronouns I, me, or my, the story is told by a first-person narrator. Find text evidence. When I reread page 151 of Remembering Hurricane Katrina, I see that the narrator uses the pronouns I, me, and my. That tells me the story is told by a first-person narrator, Hector. I can find clues in the text about the narrator's point of view. Graphic organizer. Details. Hector remembers watching the hurricane victims slowly shuffling along with faces full of sadness. Hector noticed a little boy hugging an old teddy bear and realized he had to do something. Point of view. The narrator, Hector, thinks it is important to help the hurricane victims.
All right, next we're going to discuss our genre, and we are working with realistic fiction this week. Now remember, realistic fiction is a genre that, or a kind of story that is realistic, so the things in it could happen, but they didn't happen in real life.
Realistic fiction. The selection Remembering Hurricane Katrina is realistic fiction. Realistic fiction is a made-up story. Includes realistic characters, events, and settings. Usually has dialogue. May include a flashback to an earlier event. Find text evidence. I can tell Remembering Hurricane Katrina is realistic fiction. The characters, events, and setting could all exist in real life. The story has dialogue and includes a flashback. Flashback. Sometimes authors do not present a story's events in time order. Authors might take the reader back to an event that happened in the past. This is called a flashback. Context clues. As you read Remembering Hurricane Katrina, you may come across a word that you don't know. A definition of the word may be in the text nearby, or the word may be restated in a simpler way. Sometimes an example may be given. You can use these context clues to figure out the word's meaning. Find text evidence. When I read the 5th paragraph on page 182 of Remembering Hurricane Katrina, the phrase, "collect toys and give them," helps me figure out what the word donating means. We wanted to collect toys and give them to the kids at the Astrodome, because donating the toys would help bring some happiness into the lives of these families.
All right, that takes us to the end of our notes for this week. If you have any questions, definitely let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have an amazing day, fourth grade. Take care. Bye-bye.